So moin everybody, this video is part of the Scientific Python Programming lecture or course at the University of Bremen. My name is Bálint Aradi and I am the instructor of this course. In this video I would like to show you how to install Linux in a VirtualBox. So basically how to enable you to run Linux on your device, independent whether you have on your device, on your laptop, on your machine, Windows, Mac OS X or Linux. The reason why we are doing this is that during this course I will use Linux as a developing environment. Linux is very useful if you are doing scientific programming, because in case you will have access at some point to supercomputers to run your programs on big supercomputers with many thousands or even 10,000s or 100,000s of cores, then you will be always faced with some kind of Linux operating system or Unix operating systems, very often Linux. So if you get a little bit handy in using Linux, that will be already a big advantage for you. And also we are doing this exercise in order to make sure that all of us have the same working environment all over. So basically, even if you have Linux already on your device, please follow the instructions and install the special Linux, which I'm installing it here, Ubuntu 18.4, to make sure that everything works in your environment the same as in mine. The lectures which we will do for these lectures, you find the slides in the internet on my homepage, on the institute's homepage, which you can see here now. Basically on this address, and from this address basically you can download the slides. So basically whatever I'm showing you is usually more or less also shown in the slides. So basically if you download the slides, the instruction slides for the installing Linux with VirtualBox session, this is the video today, then you will have a document something like this: install Linux into VirtualBox, and once again more here you see the exact URL where all the slides are shown. Addition to the slides, I'm creating the videos where I basically will go through the content of the slides, maybe adding also some tips and tricks when it's needed. So if something is not contained in the slide, you would find it in the video. For example, in this video we will see that I will show you an additional trick which is not shown in the slides in case the installation doesn't go the way as it's described in the slides. Good. In order to install Linux on your machine, we need two things. First of all, we need the container which will emulate the machine for our Linux operating system. For this container, I would suggest to use VirtualBox. VirtualBox can be downloaded from www.virtualbox.org, or if you have a Linux operating system, you can basically install it as a package. So I will now assume that you have already Linux on your machine, and basically that you have downloaded and installed it. So basically I will just close the browser, we don't need it, and then basically what we have is just the slides here. The second thing which you need in order to install Linux, of course, Linux itself. So we would have to download the ISO image, a kind of a bootable CD. We will use Ubuntu 18.04. If you download the slides, then you have the link to the Ubuntu image, or you can go to the Ubuntu website and download the image yourself. We will choose Ubuntu Linux because Ubuntu Linux is very sparse on resources. It doesn't need too much resources to run. So basically it's the optimal choice, in my opinion, to be run in a container as a virtual operating system. So please go and download Ubuntu. And that could take a while. It's roughly a 1.1 gigabyte ISO image, big 1.1 gigabyte big ISO image. So it could take a while. So basically, please download it now. You can stop the video here and then start again if the download finished. So I will assume now that you have downloaded it, and let's install it on our computer. First of all, you installed already VirtualBox. So basically we can start VirtualBox. Start it on your computer, however appropriate. On my computer, I just type VirtualBox and start it. The nice thing with VirtualBox, as I said, it runs on all different kind of operating systems. And if you have started VirtualBox, you should see something like this. what we need here, or you would see a window similar like this. I have already some VirtualBox instances, but this shouldn't disturb us. We will create a new one together. As I said, I will roughly follow the slides. One thing which I also remarked in the slides, the original slides had been made with figures for Ubuntu 16.4. We are installing now 18.4, but the differences are very minor, so it will be very easy to adapt the slides and the information in the slides to the current installation process. So the first thing is we have to create, as shown also in the slides, we have to create a new machine. So basically we are going on new, and we are creating a new machine. We will just name this machine Ubuntu 18.04 so that we know which operating system is it. And maybe I will just write as initial SciPro so that we know this is the one which we installed for scientific programming. So it contains all the things necessary for this course. It's important that you set, or basically VirtualBox should recognize that based on the name, that is a Linux operating system and a 64-bit operating system. Then you should go to next. Then with the next, you have to choose the number, the memory you are giving your Linux subsystem. 1 GB should be enough. If you have more RAM, then you can even gain more. It's important that you are not giving more than, let's say, half of your available RAM to the virtual machine, but actually 1 GB should be enough. Okay, so it is 1024 MB. So we are clicking on next. Now we have to choose the hard disk. If you follow the slides in the hard disk, that's the next slide is the hard disk selection, and we will create a virtual hard disk. A virtual hard disk is basically a file, an image file, which is just one file on your real device, but basically it contains an entire hard drive, an emulated hard drive for our Linux operating system. So we will just create this virtual hard drive now. The format, you can just take the default format, the VDI format, and then we have to decide whether it should be dynamically allocated or fixed size. Fixed size would mean that if we are creating a 10 or 20 GB hard drive, it would immediately allocate 20 GB space on your real device, on your real solid-state disk. It's much more practical if you don't do that, if you take the dynamical size, which means it will only allocate as much as we really have written on this virtual hard drive. So basically if you install Linux, maybe it will only take 5 GB from your operating system, and then we will just specify the maximal size. So choose please dynamically allocated, and then decide on the size. 10 GB should be more than enough for our purposes for this course. If you want later to do something else with that, so using this Linux also for other purposes, you could decide to use 20 GB, but I will just stay with 10 and then stay with 10 GB and then continue. Okay, and then basically we have, or if you go in the slides, you see we are at that point, and we have now our machine here ready. And this machine could be booted, but of course we have nothing on the hard drive, no information about the operating system yet. So what we will do, we will boot up this machine with the bootable CD, which you have downloaded, this ISO image, and then install Ubuntu on the absolutely empty hard drive. In order to make sure that the machine knows where to find this boot CD, we have to modify the settings. So we go to settings. Within settings, we will go to storage, and on the storage you see the CD symbol. You are clicking on a CD symbol, and then here we can add the file. You can say choose virtual optical disk file, and for me this is basically in my home directory is the file Ubuntu 18.04 desktop modules desktop amd.iso, and then we add. And we also additionally say that it's a live CD and DVD. And that's it, basically. We are staying OK, clicking OK. And with that, we are finished. And now we can basically start our virtual machine, so boot the operating system. So I will click on Start and see what happens. No, you don't see anything happening. But the reason for that is that basically the window appeared on a different window. Not on the one which you see on the screen, but that I can fix in a second. I will just draw it here and show you what to do. Now here first you have to choose the language. No, you don't see what happens here. So basically it's hard to read, therefore I will just make a modification. When I go to the view, I will choose a scale factor 200% so that you can see a little bit better what is happening on my screen. I will choose the language English, and please also you, doesn't matter which is your native language, please choose English as a language so that basically the messages which you get from the operating system are exactly the same as mine. You can also choose the key map in case you have let's say a German keyboard or any kind of other different keyboard. I have a Hungarian keyboard, so I will now choose with F3. I was pushing the F3 button. I will choose Hungarian key map. And otherwise, the only thing I need is to install Lubuntu. So select install Lubuntu and just hit enter. And then basically what the system should do is to read this ISO image and boot basically Linux from this ISO image. Okay, so we have to wait a little bit depending how fast your device is, but as you can see, it's already something is already happening, which is a good sign, and in a few seconds the installation program should start. Of course, it has to read the entire operating system from this file, so it takes a while, but now it's already, the graphical environment has been initialized, and then within this graphical environment we will just get immediately the selections we have to do during the installation. In the meantime, we can proceed with the slides, exactly the same steps which I did before. You can see also on the slide, and then here you see exactly the same window which we see here. The welcome window where you have to choose the language again. Again, I would strongly recommend to choose English even if you are not English native speaker. Then you have again the chance to change your keyboard layout or even test it whether the special characters on your keyboard are transmitted correctly. So I will stay with my selection as it was. And then we are doing a normal installation here. And I would at the moment recommend not to download the updates for the moment. We will do that later because that would make the installation process much longer. And first I would like to make sure that you have a running system. And when you have a running system, we can still update it. So we will say continue normal installation. And then the next question we have to answer is about the installation type. And in the installation type, we will just say erase disk and install Ubuntu. Again, with disk, it means the virtual drive, this one single file which was created for your Linux subsystem, for your virtual machine. So basically, it does not affect any files on your real device, on your hard drive. So we can let Ubuntu erase the disk and install Ubuntu. Then we get a warning that it will format that disk, that virtual disk, which is fine. I would like to make a note. We just take the standard installation procedure. If you would like to install Linux on a device, not in a VirtualBox, on a device for real use, then you should maybe choose manual partition and make a much smarter or more flexible partition scheme. You can look up in the internet what are the best strategies. But for this virtual machine which we are using for the course, the standard strategy is okay. But for example, if you wanted to have an encrypted drive, which is really recommendable if you are installing Linux on a normal device as the operating system on a device, then you should do a little bit differently, but that you can look up. There are a lot of instructions in the internet. The installation has started now. We can select our time zone. This is time zone Berlin for me, so I will just click on continue. So it already guessed the time zone correctly. And the last thing which we have to enter is we have to create a user. So you have to enter your name. I will enter my name here. The computer's name, I will just use SciPro20 for scientific programming. My username, you can leave it as it is, or you can choose something else. I usually prefer to use my family name as username, but it's up to you. To use yours, of course, and you should choose a password which is strong enough. And whether it's strong enough, you will see it in the window. It says, okay, it's a strong password, and then you have to confirm your password. Okay, and then I would suggest to select the options that you can log in automatically. That's very handy. So basically when you start your system, it should automatically log you in. Okay, if you are finished with that, you can click on continue, and then basically we finished everything which is needed for the installation. If you look on the slides, you have exactly the similar kind of fields which you have seen here, and basically when you entered that one, the next window which is interesting for us when this installation has finished is the restart window. The installation itself will take a while, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on your device, on the speed of your device. So I will basically suggest that you are now taking a coffee or a tea and wait for the installation, and we will continue if the installation process finished on my device. Okay, I hope you had a nice tea or coffee, and I hope that the installation finished on your computer. On my computer it did, as you can see, and basically I got now the window where I can choose restarting the computer. So I will just click restart now, and then basically what should happen, that the operating system shuts down, then it restarts. This time the hard drive contains already the Linux subsystem. It asks to remove the CD and press enter. You can just press enter at this point, and then we will see what happens. So basically the operating system should start now. If you look at the slides, we are now here, and the next step which we want to do is to make sure that we are installing the so-called guest edition CD image, the guest editions, which enables a much better interaction of the graphical user interface and the graphical capabilities of our virtual machine with the host operating system. And if everything worked fine on your machine, then you should see that kind of image, what is shown here, and then you go into this insert guest edition CD, and then basically you will open a terminal, go to the menu, and then open a terminal as shown in the slides, and then you are doing some commands. Now apparently in my case it didn't work out, and that can happen sometimes, unfortunately, with VirtualBox, that when you install it the first time, especially if you have things like multiple displays, which I have at the moment, so dual monitor, then sometimes it doesn't work properly at the first time. You can see theoretically the machine should have started, I mean it's finished, but you just see a black screen. And I would like to show you now an alternative way how you can fix it. And basically if we install the guest editions, this problem should automatically go away, or usually goes away. But unfortunately we cannot install the guest editions the way how it's shown in the slides, because the graphical environment doesn't work. The machine itself works. So basically if you go to the VirtualBox container and you are pressing Ctrl and F1 or Steuerung F1 if you have a German keyboard, then you can switch to the text console, and it seems that it indeed works. So it's not that it wouldn't work. The only problem is that the graphical environment doesn't work, and therefore the steps which are described there, we will do it via the graphical via the text environment. So basically here now I will just log in. I will use my login name and the password which I have chosen, which I enter now, and then basically I can use Linux, so it's up there and it's working. The only problem is, as I said, that we cannot use the graphical environment for the moment. I will just change something to make sure that you can see the things better, because if it's this green or this blue script, blue characters on the black background, it's not that easy to see. Okay, so let's follow the tutorial, but only partially. So the tutorial says we have to put in the device images. So we go to devices and we say insert guest edition CD image. So basically it mimics as if you would put in a CD in your virtual computer. And if you do that, it should appear under media. Then under your username, so you are going with CD, you change with CD in /media. So basically you see it here, CD/media. Then with CD you change into the container, into the working directory of the directory of your username. And it's this directory you see if you make ls shows you the files contained in the directory. So this is already a little bit introduction into using the command line shell. You see VBox. As I said, you only have to do this kind of operation if the graphical environment didn't work out. Just once more going to the slides. If the graphical environment started immediately, you do very similar steps. You are basically inserting the guest edition CD. Then you are opening an LX terminal, which is basically the same kind of graphical terminal window which we have here now. The only difference is that we do not have the graphical environment behind that, but the steps will be exactly the same. Okay, good. Now what we have to do, we would have to CD in this directory, which is called VBox something. It's very annoying to type a lot, but under Linux it's very easy. You just start typing the first letter, capital V, and then pushing on the tab button, and it will, the tabulator, and the tabulator would automatically basically extend the file name, so that we expand the file name so that you don't have to type all of that. And if you look in that directory, there are many files, but the only one which is interesting for us is VBox Linux. And now you can also push the tabulator button, and then it expands the file name. And this is the file we want to run. However, this file you have to run as super user as root. And the command for that in Ubuntu would be sudo. Sudo means the command which I'm specifying should be run as root. You should be very careful to run only commands as sudo which are really necessary, but this installation step requires root privileges. You have to enter just your password once more, and then we are starting it, and it will start copying some installer modules, installing some additional modules, and you will see that it will not work out. Basically, it will not, when you start it, it will not do what you wish, and we will get an error message, and I want to show you this error message so that you see it. And the error message now appeared. This system, it says the system is currently not set up to build kernel modules, and the next line is relevant. It says please install the GCC make perl packages from your distribution. So this is what we will have to do first. So we will say sudo apt install. We want to install. apt is the tool which is downloading and installing the packages from the central repository. And then we are just taking GCC, make, and perl, so the free packages which must be installed. So we are installing these free packages. We are just hitting enter. We don't have to enter our password anymore because we did that already once. So we immediately obtain the root privileges. And then it's asking you, okay, I want to download and install those packages, whether it's fine. And then you would just say yes. So you just hit enter. That's the default choice, yes. And then it takes a little bit. It will download all those packages. And if the packages had been downloaded, then basically they are installed one by one. Fortunately, that doesn't take too long, just a few minutes. And then you have all the packages which you need in order to install or to run the installer program for this guest edition in your virtual machine. So it's almost finished. Now we are installing, so basically it was unpacking all the stuff. So first downloading, then unpacking, and then installing. So it's quite a robust process. If some problems appear during the installation, usually your system never stays in an unstable state. So the installation process under Ubuntu, it's quite robust. Now we are finished. Now we want to execute the command which we had before. You can either type it again, or you just pushing the arrow button upwards. If you push the arrow button upwards, then you get the previous command. If you push it once more, then the command before, and that was exactly the command which we wanted to execute. So basically now we can execute it again. It will take a while until this finishes, roughly 1 or 2 minutes, but then we should have everything which we need. or at least I hope. So let's wait. In the meantime, I feel like maybe I can tell you that this trick which I did with the scaling, so here view and the scale factor by 200, you can do the same trick if the window which you get on your screen is too small. That usually happens if you have a high resolution screen like a 4K monitor or a high resolution laptop screen like Retina display. Once the guest edition had been installed, you do not necessarily need that scaling factor anymore. So then you can basically just set it back to 100%. I will leave it at 200% to make sure that the font is big enough that you can see if I do something on my screen. Okay, so the installation is still running, but it should be ready in a second. So it seems that the installation process now it's coming to the end. If your installation process is not that far yet, it didn't finish yet, then you can just stop the video here and then continue whenever the installation finished. Here basically it creates now the kernel modules which are needed in order to have this smooth interaction between the graphical interface of the virtual machine and the graphical interface for the host system. Okay, so it's already building the kernel modules. That means that can compile. That still can take a few more minutes, but we should be soon finished. So I just have stopped my video for a second and now started again. So basically, if you are finished, you should continue from this point. If you are finished with the installation, sorry. So basically, how do you realize that the installation has finished? That you get back basically the prompt. So basically, you can now enter again Linux commands or shell commands. Now everything has been installed. We would like to reboot the machine. So first, I will just shut down the machine. So basically, just make sure that the operating system shuts down cleanly. And before I start the machine again, I want to change two things. First of all, I want to remove the CD. So if you go to settings, you remember in storage, we were adding this VBox guest edition. Now we will just remove this not the guest edition, sorry, it was the original booting ISO image of Lubuntu. We will just remove this ISO image here so that it doesn't boot from there. It wouldn't happen anyway because it starts by default from the hard drive, but still we don't need it anymore. I just have removed. And the other settings maybe you should do, especially if your display has a high resolution. Usually by default the amount of memory you get is not that high, it's 33 megabyte. It would be good if you would push it up at least 64 megabyte for the display with the video memory. The monitor count you can leave on 1. I have the scaling of 200%. That's not that important. You can just, as I said, if the screen is big enough for you, you can just leave it on 100%. And if you have enough memory, you may think about to change this memory limit from 1 gigabyte to 2 gigabyte, provided you have at least 4 gigabyte memory on your device altogether. Okay, that's it basically. And now I will just start it. So basically I will start the scientific programming Lubuntu image. Now the boot device starts, and it is first checking the hard drive, whether the hard drive is clean, which seems to be the case. And now let's hope that the graphical user interface starts as anticipated. So the operating system is loading now. And apparently that's the case. So basically now we have a working Lubuntu installation in this VirtualBox. Yes, and that's basically, if you go to the slides, we are now basically here. Now, if you want to make, which I would suggest, if you work under Ubuntu, under Linux, it makes sense to make it full screen. In order to make full screen, is basically you have to choose the right control key, or if you have a German keyboard, it's called STRG, Steuerung key, and you are pushing right control and F, full screen, and then basically it should switch to full screen. And apparently it's still not optimal, because in my case it still does not adapt to the screen size, which it actually should. So let's try it again, and no, this time it worked. Okay, so basically now we have the full desktop, and this full desktop we can work as if it were a Linux machine. I mean, this is basically a Linux machine. So one thing I would like to ask you to do, maybe the trash, if you don't want to have it here, you can remove it. The easiest thing is that you are right-clicking on your desktop and you are setting the desktop preferences, and basically you can go to desktop icons, and then usually I am removing trash can folder and also connected volumes from the desktop. If you can do the same changes if you like. And then one thing which I would like to suggest you is we will use this command line tool, the system tools, and LX terminal. This is our terminal where we can enter basically the commands. Let me make here the font a little bit bigger to make sure that you can see whatever I enter. So maybe I will change the font from 10 to 13 points so that it's a little bit better. You can see it better what I'm typing. Okay. So much better. And we will use this terminal a lot, and therefore basically what I would suggest is that you are putting it here into this quick access bar, and that you would do by coming here with the cursor and right clicking and then setting the application launch and taskbar settings accordingly. And here you can basically add from the menu any kind of applications you are using often, and we would add system tools and LX terminal. We would just add it, and we would just move it up because maybe that's the one which we will use most often. So if you close this window, and then you open it again, then you just click it here and you have your graphical window. Okay, and although this is now uses the entire screen, nevertheless this Linux is just running as a program. So basically I can now change also to my slides, which is a different window on my machine. So basically your Linux is running just in one window. And if you look at the slides, basically the last slide which we are doing is again adding this window, this extra LX term shortcut to this taskbar. Okay, and with that, basically we have finished. We have now installed Ubuntu 18.04 in the VirtualBox, and this is exactly the system we will use in the next session to make our first steps within Linux. Thanks a lot for your attention, and looking forward to the next course.